Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are proceeding with the fire chat conversation. We have a pleasure to have with us at these busy days with the General Assembly, the Foreign Minister and then Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia together with us. We have half an hour scheduled for this conversation, and I'm sure this will be very interesting and engaging to all of you, and I hope that it will be engaging and interesting for you, Madam Minister, as well. So without further ado, I'll right away go and jump into the conversation because it's a rare and good opportunity for us to have you with us, so that I will spend less time for introducing you rather than opening the floor for us to have this conversation. We have a very intriguing but not unusual theme, considering what we've been discussing during these 2 days, for us to consider during this fire chat conversation, as we called this session. It's multilateralism in the world that looks, and leadership for multilateralism in a world that seems to be a runaway world in that regard. It's a bit provoking, but it's something that I guess many of us have that feeling that we are not at an usual point of inflection or change that is important but not profound in international relations. It really feels that the changes that we are experiencing right now are tectonic, and but really resemble a situation when the world is running away too fast with the developments, not only in technology, but in politics, with geopolitics as well. It outpaces, in some sense, the frameworks and established rules of the games as we've had it to catch up with this development. So in that world, leadership, I would say, matters even more than ever. It's a time of crisis, but opportunity, but with the fast forward pacing of everything that we are experiencing. So with all this experience yourself that you have in leadership positions from a country that is a member of the EU, has been at the forefront of international arena, including in the Security Council, how would you define the role of leadership? What kind of leadership we're craving for to see that we can have a better chance of building a world that respects and is built on multilateralism, constructive cooperation, rather than blocks being at loggerheads with each other, and then competition rather than cooperation. Does leadership matter in this modern era?
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's truly a very busy week for everyone, I believe. But it's very timely, this discussion that we are having. I just came now from the conference of last countries, and we had pretty much the same discussion. You know, Slovenia is a non-permanent member in the Security Council. We do have a painful experience, a challenging experience, exactly with the questions that you put forward. Whether leadership matters, it matters. And it's critical. As it's critical, the work of the Security Council. It's absolutely critical, but it's also ineffective. We are dealing for a year and a half with a lot of world crises. We have from Sudan, Yemen, Gaza, that is basically shaping throughout the whole term of the Security Council, the war in Ukraine, and the lack of efficiency of the Security Council, because we do have a disrespect of the international law, of the UN Charter. I was just now reflecting, coming on my way here, that the Palace of Peace, or the United Nations, celebrating 80 years, it's a unique forum where the whole world is meeting. 80 years ago, all these nations signed and committed to take care about the peace and security in the world, to commit to the UN Charter. All nations signed it. So how now to reinvent this multilateralism, adapt it to current geopolitical situation when we live in the world that we see more multipolar relations, where we see more transactional relations, where we see more rules of the power than power of the rules. And from the perspective of country as Slovenia, I like to say it's not a small country. We might have a small body, but we do have a big brain. I think it matters to be principled. We lack principled governments, and we lack principled leadership. And I have to say that I'm very proud about the voice of Slovenia and the foreign policy, because addressing all the conflicts at the table of the Security Council or United Nations, we speak with the same principles and standards. We stay committed to the international law, to humanitarian law, and to UN Charter, also to the reform of the organization. Needless to mention that many armed conflicts occupy us. I mean, the war in Gaza became a symbol of inaction, became a symbol that the international community has not only fallen on the test of humanity, but we didn't manage to bring peace to the region. It's getting worse. We allow unprincipled governments and illegitimate acts to happen against the innocent civilian population. So I think that the leadership needs to recommit to the basic values that put together this organization that is a very unique platform, as I said, for bringing peace and stability together in the world.
Thank you, Minister. And you've raised a very important issue related to the principles and to the values. We've been discussing quite a lot yesterday about that as well. And at some point in one of the panel discussions, we've noted that it seems that this evolution of the global order had its own trajectory. After the Second World War, it evolved into the bipolar world for understandable at the time reasons. Then after dissolution of the Soviet Union, we ended up with the unipolar world. And then many in different parts of the globe started to crave for multipolarity, as if the multi itself was enough for betterment of the global order, because unipolarity was deemed to be not good in that regard. And then now we are ending up in a situation, as it seems that there's no real clarity of what multipolarity means. And your message is that if there are no values, no principles, multipolarity in and itself is not an achievement. It might be even a challenge if we don't shape it. Would you agree with that takeaway, if I understood it correctly, or how would you expand on that if you would want to?
I think that it's very important to strengthen multilateralism. At least from the perspective of my country, you mentioned at the beginning, we are part of EU, we are part of NATO alliance, of United Nations Security Council currently. We have a huge responsibility, legal responsibility, moral responsibility. And of course, we, in today's world where geopolitics is changing a lot or shifting to Indo-Pacific, and you see rivalries and different, competitive forces and global forces arise, we need to recommit ourselves to make this multilateralism more up-to-date, more efficient. This is very clear. We are searching maybe out of these traditional regional alliances or organizations that we belong, other like-minded partners. We reach out to find countries that think alike. I think it's very important, especially in diplomacy, that we try to keep political dialogue, that we try to listen to each other, also to hear each other and to understand each other, and to build back confidence. I think we have a big distrust and lack of confidence. And when Slovenia joined this competition to become a member of the Security Council, our motivation was to build trust, to regain trust. And in effect, from that perspective, I think we can be really an honest broker. But the trust is something that we lack. Also maybe to move out to find these alliances where we can really work together, again, based on international law and humanitarian law. We had this morning a very interesting breakfast on the work of ICC and ICJ. Why I'm bringing that forward? Because it's in a way interconnected. We do have to respect the work of international tribunals and protect them, because they have the work to protect all these mechanisms, our civilians. There has nothing to be above that. And I think there is a serious danger that ICC can be sanctioned, or as judges or prosecutors. And that can lead to serious escalation, not to mention that we see a very challenging and difficult world.
Accountability for fundamental violations of the fundamental norms of international law is at the core of whether or not there is trust in the system. And then no system is perfect, but then when the violations and unaccountability accumulate to the degree that trust is broken, we face the crisis as we do. Nizami Ganjavi Center has been from the very beginning a proponent of creation of International Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression, and we've been engaged in helping, promoting, at that time, what seemed to be an idea, and now which evolved into a project and a process which has its own diplomatic traction and support from the side of the EU, at least in this regard. And if we can have a candid conversation about that, when we speak about the trust, how do you see that issue of accountability of the actor, like Russia, for example, which is a disruptor at the core of it, of the system, of the rules-based international order? Is it possible at all to regain that trust if this issue of accountability, as you mentioned as well on other occasions, will not be dealt with? Are we lying to ourselves? We think that we can pull it off without that?
I mean, accountability is extremely important. Slovenia pays high importance to accountability. We were also promoter and the part of the core group while establishing the ad hoc tribunal for accountability for the crimes in Ukraine. Certainly, we need to support the work of the tribunals, and we always support the work of international tribunals. And I can recall one very important event that we hosted back in Slovenia 2 years ago, the Convention on MLA. It was a Hague Convention, Ljubljana Convention, that we somehow joined the countries of the UN and signatories, we are still gathering them, to facilitate the work of tribunals to better exchange of mutual legal assistance. And this is also very important, the commitment of the party states to the work of tribunals and accountability. And certainly we need to bring always perpetrators and those that are guilty for the war crimes or crimes against humanity to the justice. Just to mention, because it's anyway public information today, that we are serious about the work of tribunals. You will remember that the ICC in July this year issued that all Israelis' policies are against the international law and humanitarian law. Therefore, the Slovenian government today did quite a courageous step, but we made a measure against the Prime Minister Netanyahu, declared him as a persona non grata on the basis of the foundings of the court in July back then, because we want to show that we are committed to the work of the tribunals and we are committed to the also universal law and the decisions of be it ICJ or ICC.
Thank you for your candid response, Minister. I want to switch a little bit to the EU. There is great expectation, not just from the members of the EU, for the EU to be part of that leadership circle that shapes the new order when it comes to what it will be based on multilateralism and values and principles as you've described it. There are challenges that all actors that have potential for being leaders like that do face. On EU, it's most frequently that is mentioned that there are internal fractions. It's very difficult to come with unanimity of that. And you're more than welcome to comment on that as well. But I would want you as well to touch base on how EU could do better, perhaps, in doing exactly what you've mentioned, bridging with the countries or the regions that are like-minded, so that it has a better way of engaging, interacting, and aligning with common force with like-minded regions and countries for creating that world order. One example is our own region, my own region, when it comes to Caucasus and Central Asia, for example, where there is more and more engagement with the new Black Sea strategy that EU has in mind, greater understanding that we have common goals despite of the differences maybe with some of the countries, bringing that multilateral world into fruition rather than fragmented world. So do you think that there is more that you could do in this direction, and how you would see the role of the EU as a leader in this direction as well being shaped for the future?
First, maybe the answer as regards the European continent and the EU as such. We are, I think, at a quite important crossroad. If I look to the Russian aggression in Ukraine, the geopolitics, the uncertainties, also economic uncertainties, and also the simple fact that Europe is economically lagging behind the big, China, US, the big development, that we really do have to do much more. You all recall Draghi report and how much investments we need to boost our economy. But I think it's also at the same time a strong opportunity for Europe. We are still a 500 million big market, and I think if we are capable of use to build or rebuild our resilience, recovery, it's very important that we act. And it's really, I think, very necessary that Europe stays strong, even rebuild strength, and also enlarge itself and is united. I am a strong advocate for enlargement of the European Union. Slovenia has been a strong advocate for the enlargement of the European Union for the last 20 years, speaking about our direct neighborhood region of the Western Balkans, because we do strongly believe that these countries are part of Europe and will always be part of Europe. We need to encourage them, bring the reforms through, and really open the door in the European Union before we lose them. And it is important for the stability and unity of the European, and also its strength. But the same goes now for the eastern flank, the partnership. When we speak about Ukraine, we speak about Moldova, of course, we speak about Iceland, potentially even Norway. So it's interesting to see the development that there are more and more countries that actually want to be part of European continent, and we wish to encourage them. On the other hand, in the European Union, we need to encourage ourselves that we can be ready to do so. These are heavy political decisions, and the public opinion, frankly, is not very supportive. This is maybe not direct answer to your question, but I think Europe has a lot of potential, unused potential, and we need to have a strong and brave leadership to address this potential, to really boost our economies, make our voice heard. And for that is important that our voice is united and unique. And you asked me about the divisions. Yes, we do have divisions. And we have to bridge them. We have to find consensus where we can and build on that and be much more self-confident on what we stand for.
And I believe that Europe has a good potential of bringing along the countries that are even beyond the immediate neighborhood, but could be part of the alliance of the vision of the new order in that regard. So that's a time not to shy away from strategic autonomy as it's being talked about for a long time, but rather see perhaps what are the benefits to that as well. One issue that when we speak about the multilateralism is always like an elephant in the room unless we want to talk about it openly, is that how are we getting to the point when multilateralism emerges as a constructive framework if US and China remain to be at loggerheads? So how would you assess the prospect of that being diminished, or it's still to be expected to be part of our life for some time? Because if they are in this position, it's harder to deal with a commonality of agenda building, so to say, rather than being sometimes pushed to be on one side or the other for some countries in different parts of the world. How would you, after having GA week going on as well, what's your reflections on that?
I mean, it's not an easy question. It's always, I would say, better to have a healthy competition than the rivalry. It's always better to have a competition, cooperation. But I mentioned before, geopolitics is playing a different role, and also multipolar and the transactional relations. We see a lot of, also announcements of trade wars, tariffs, you know, the positions that I'm not really in favor of, especially doesn't bring many goods to the citizens. But I think that the dialogue is very important. I had yesterday a chance to sit at the table of all transatlantic ministers and also our guests from Azerbaijan, Armenia, Ukraine, Austria, Malta. It was a very interesting discussion on all the wars, how to end them, what more we can do. And I think these discussions are very important because we do try to understand each other, how to find a political solution instead of the military one. I think there is a general awareness that the military is not going to stop the war, but we need sooner or later to have sides to sit down and discuss. In that regard, for Europeans, at least, our relation with the transatlantic ally is a very important one. And we have to build on that relation and try to really, even dialogue is important when we disagree on some things. I also was very happy when 2 weeks ago I hosted in Slovenia a Chinese foreign minister. We had a long and frank discussion about all the wars and global issues and the role of the big powers and how to engage and what is our responsibility. I think it's good to have this interaction. It's very important to try to listen to each other and try to see where you can make a breakthrough or what more you can do. So in that respect, I think multilateralism is important. It's important to hear the voice of, I mentioned we sit in the Security Council, but you have big powers playing a very important role also in the General Assembly. Currently, we have a very important role that we play as E10. We gather this week just the countries that are sitting in the non-permanent council, E10 plus incoming 5. 15 countries. Slovenia introduced that transition or that tradition. 3 years ago, we started gathering together E-countries, incoming countries, because it's also shifting power. If you look that in the Security Council you have a paralysis and that you cannot, without veto or abstention, make any resolution pass through, but E10 can. And this work and cooperation that currently we are having, we are really, really working well. Last year experience and this year experience, and we'll continue doing so. We now invite also incoming to build this, you know, better understanding among us and try to breach consensus and work on the resolutions and put them forward in the absence maybe of a unity and commitment in the Security Council among 5 big countries. I'm maybe going a bit around everything that comes to my mind.
This is very interesting, and we're very grateful actually for all your reflections, which are very much up to the point. I'd like to put more meat on UN-related issues that you've touched base. UN is at the core of the global governance in so many ways for we're reaching the 80th anniversary for the organization. You mentioned already in your own words that the Security Council has a paralysis of its own. There have been many initiatives, proposals, talks, expert dialogues on what it should be when we speak about the reform. And you have an insider's view of how the Security Council functions, or perhaps for that. Do we have any progress at all in this direction after so many years? So it's still the same conversation. I've heard Alex Stubb coming up with a very bold idea these days, for example, that no veto power should be at all according to any member. I understand it's something that pushes the boundary and it had to be said. So where are we now? Is it still the same vicious circle? Or perhaps with all the crisis and conflict and human sufferings that we have, there is some kind of awakening, hope of that.
Maybe 2 points I can really mention, because as I said before, the work of the Security Council is absolutely critical. It is very important. The reform is equally very important, looking just to the agenda of the Security Council, knowing we discuss sometimes 80% of the agenda on Africa without Africa, or name it. So reform also is very necessary. But there are 2 initiatives. One, Slovenia put forward our presidents 2 days ago at the General Assembly, and I find it very interesting one because of the veto you mentioned. If there is a veto in the Security Council, the General Assembly could maybe ask the courts to address the issue, whether it's right if a country in the Security Council uses a veto when it comes to genocide or human crimes, crimes against humanity, that the General Assembly would address the courts to take a decision on that. Because anyway, we have a, it's a bit upgrade on initiative for the Security Council and the use of veto powers, but I find it very interesting. And there will be also interesting discussion at the end of this year when the procedure opens for the new Secretary General of the President of the General Assembly, Secretary General. We will be engaged as a country that is presiding Security Council in December, because we will be most probably drafting the letter together with our colleagues on how and who this and what kind of person shall be on the top of the Security Council. And it will sparkle, I think, a very interesting debate, what kind of person we want to see as a Secretary General. And this procedure opens this year. So I am really excited before drafting this letter and looking into this discussion.
I'd like actually to follow up briefly on that, because this is a huge part of that trust rebuilding in so many ways for the UN as well. When it comes to the tradition, there is an expectation that the next Secretary General should be a woman. I don't want to sound as because I'm a woman, you're a woman, and then I'm asking this question with a bias, but would you think that when it comes to, for so many decades of the organization being led by a man, time has really come for, not to be the sole reason for anybody, obviously, to be elected in this position, but I believe there are enough capable, not just simply capable, but outstanding women candidates that could fit the position. So is this something that is expected? Because this is not just the regional, but then sort of the gender-based expectation that's floating around, or what would be your reflection on that?
I mean, thank you for bringing that. I didn't want in the first place being woman myself, but of course I signed every possible initiative, and we do have many initiatives that the next Secretary General should be a woman. We signed recently a letter, foreign ministers, when we met in Canada, and there are other initiatives, including for the, we had in the history of General Assembly, if you look so far, only it's now the 5th female leader of the General Assembly in the, 80 years history. So I do agree with you that we have a lot more capable women, and it also reflects the balance in the society. So whether you look from that perspective, whether we will find a female candidate, certainly there are. That's also a regional question, so I think it will be quite a big struggle ongoing, so I don't dare to predict who the next person will be. I think there will be a lot of geopolitics and a lot of different interests. And then also a lot of course, it's a political decision. We all know well which countries and for what at the end will be acceptable for someone. So I do hope we will manage to get a person that will be the best and most suitable for the position.
Thank you for your response, and I appreciate your comment about initiative related to the reference to the court from the General Assembly as well. I'm a public international lawyer by education myself, so having that angle of using erga omnes obligations in international law as a link for that to happen, it's very interesting, creative way of approaching the issue, and I'm glad that Slovenia takes that initiative to use this opportunity on behalf of your country. At Nizami Ganjavi International Center, we do have our feature big event on an annual basis in Baku when we have a Baku forum, and we take pride of having a younger generation being part of that platform as well. And then they all established professionals already experienced in their own fields, but being part of the discourse when we discuss all of those issues. And just reflecting on that for our own benefit, perhaps, while having you here with us, what would be your advice, perhaps, on leadership to the younger generation of diplomats and statesmen in this new era of what it takes to be a good leader, and then what kind of leadership would matter for the future? I mean, would you reassess any of it that you had in your vision when you were at that stage of your career development, or you still stick to the vision that you had in that sense of the basics of what it is?
Thank you. I think first you have to start with yourself. When I entered in a ministry, now it's the 4th year that I'm the Minister for Foreign Affairs. I've been in foreign politics for almost 20 years through the European Parliament before. I see some familiar faces and colleagues and friends. My first decisions, what I realized not being professional diplomat, one is that I had to do much more for women balance on high positions. But first, before I speak out how to bring women, policies in our foreign policy agenda, I had to start with myself. Same goes with young people, because I realized that our system back at home was very old in a way. That was difficult to attract young people to the diplomacy and also encourage them that this is a very beautiful profession. We had to start really building quite from the bottom to the top to attract, to go through university, to discuss, to even open up the system of diplomacy to make them understand that maybe where I was a journalist myself before, and when I came as a minister, they tried to shape every sentence of mine in a very diplomatic one. It was extremely painful because I couldn't frame myself that much as I had to do. But at the same time, I realized today politicians are, I don't want to say populist, but they're much more open in their thoughts and they are not so much framed. And I think with that we try to bring our language closer to the people, it's very important. Equally goes to bring our language closer to young population, that they make them understand what politics stands about, what diplomacy stands about, and to really to adapt. Today social media puts our lives upside down, and we have to understand that social media is having a huge, not only a privilege, but also a challenge to our lives and also a damage. So the world is changing that fast that we have to be capable in adapting in many, many ways.
I know, Minister, that you're very busy, and we've taken good advantage of your presence with us. I think it's a big round of applause is due from our side for your contributions. And thank you. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.